A Viscoplastopology VPT interpretation of 3 TSI-BPD life trajectories, number 1691, VPT 137, 6/20 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category Psychology, Life Trajectory. Viscoplastopology VPT. Preface for readers: eat more protein and fresh vegetables. Eat less red meat and processed food. Reduce portions if overweight. Eating a little less will not hurt you. Overeating for years will. Exercise daily. Walk at least 7,000 to 8,000 steps. Drink 85 to 100 ounces to 0.5 to 3.0 liters of water daily. Sleep 6 to 7 hours each night. Manage stress. Avoid draining people and unnecessary conflicts. Put your health first. Wealth, fame, and power mean little without health and life. Introduction. In my previous paper, 3-stage developmental vulnerability modeled from borderline personality disorder to life trajectory analysis, No. 1690, VPT number 136, June 20, 2026. I proposed a simple mathematical framework to examine how childhood abandonment, environmental stability, and significant adult relationships interact across 7 decades of life. The primary purpose of that paper was to introduce the conceptual model and demonstrate how through representative developmental trajectories could emerge from different combinations of developmental influences. That paper utilized the viscoplastic energy method VMT to calculate the interior magnitudes of energy states at different time instants and to compare VMT energy contribution ratios. After completing that analysis, I realized that the mathematical equation itself was not the most important contribution. The more important contribution was the visualization of developmental trajectories as a mathematician, physicist, and engineer. I have always been interested in understanding not only outcomes but also pathways. 2 individuals may arrive at the same destination through entirely different routes. Likewise, 2 individuals may begin from similar childhood conditions yet arrive at dramatically different life outcomes. This supplementary paper No. 1691 focuses primarily on visualization rather than mathematics. Introduces several graphical topology methods designed to illustrate how developmental vulnerabilities evolve across 7 decades and how developmental trajectories may diverge, amplify, stabilize, or partially recover over time. The attached figure combines 3 different views of the same developmental system: TSI-BPD trajectory curves, 3-dimensional developmental trajectory space, developmental spiral diagrams. Together, these figures provide an exterior topological view of human development. Why visualization matters. Traditional psychology often relies heavily on narrative descriptions. For example, a therapist may describe childhood trauma. A psychiatrist may describe symptoms. A researcher may describe diagnostic criteria. These approaches are valuable, but they are often difficult to visualize over long periods of time. Throughout my research work in both psychology and pathophysiology, I have repeatedly discovered that exterior geography topological visualization frequently reveals patterns that remain hidden inside tables and written descriptions. A table provides information. A figure reveals structure. A trajectory reveals direction. The purpose of the present paper is therefore to move one step beyond numerical scores and explore developmental vulnerability through graphical topology. The 3 complementary views. The combined figure presents 3 complementary perspectives. View 1, outcome trajectory. Upper left graph displays TSI-BPD values across 7 decades. This figure answers a simple question: what happened? Case A demonstrates progressive amplification of developmental strain. Case B demonstrates gradual reduction of developmental strain. Case C remains relatively stable throughout life. Viewed alone, this figure clearly separates the 3 life trajectories. However, it does not fully explain why those trajectories differ. It represents outcome rather than mechanism. View 2, 3-dimensional developmental space. Lower left figure introduces a 3-dimensional developmental space. These 3 axes represent: x-axis, amplified TSI-BPD score; y-axis, childhood abandonment; axis, adult relationship influence. Each point represents 1 decade of life. The connected points create a developmental trajectory through space, and like the TSI graph, this figure answers a different question: how did the trajectory evolve? Case A occupies the largest volume of developmental space. Case B follows a contracting path. Case C remains compressed near TH origin. This visualization resembles trajectory analysis commonly used in engineering, physics, and dynamical systems. Instead of examining isolated developmental states, these figures display movement through developmental space from a VPT perspective. This may be the most informative figure because it directly visualizes developmental direction and topological separation. Developmental spiral visualization. The right side of the combined figure introduces a third representation. I refer to these diagrams as developmental spirals. Each colored polygon represents one decade of life. The four axes represent TSI-BPD childhood, abandonment and stability-adult relationship influence. And like a conventional radar chart that displays only a single snapshot, the developmental spiral displays 7 sequential developmental states. The reader can mentally reconstruct the trajectory by observing how the shape evolves across time. This approach transforms a static radar chart into a developmental movie. 3 distinct developmental patterns. The developmental spirals reveal several interesting patterns. Case of persistent amplification says it begins with severe abandonment damage. As adulthood progresses, the adult relationship axis expands dramatically. Instead of repairing the original injury, adulthood repeatedly reinforces it. The polygon grows larger and becomes increasingly distorted. The resulting trajectory resembles continuous amplification. This pattern corresponds closely to the severe lifelong developmental strain observed in the TSI trajectory curve. Case B, progressive repair. Case B begins with substantial abandonment damage but gradually contracts over time. The polygon becomes smaller and more balanced. This pattern reflects the corrective influences of psychotherapy, stable marriage, emotional support from marital partner, and long-term environmental stability. The developmental strain does not disappear completely, but its influence progressively weakens. This visualization provides a graphical representation of emotional neuroplasticity operating across decades. Case C, stable development. Case C exhibits minimal shape variation throughout life. The developmental spiral remains small and highly stable. This pattern represents a developmental trajectory with little evidence of accumulated vulnerability. The near-constant geometry reflects long-term psychological stability. Topology versus diagnosis. One realization emerged repeatedly during this project. Traditional psychological classification focuses on diagnosis. My interest gradually shifted toward topology. A diagnosis answers, what condition does the person have? A topological trajectory asks, how did the person arrive here? The distinction is important. 2 individuals may receive the same diagnosis while following completely different developmental pathways. Conversely, 2 individuals with similar childhood experiences may eventually diverge into entirely different outcomes. The topological perspective therefore emphasizes developmental pathways rather than diagnostic labels. Viscoplastopology interpretation. Within the VPT framework, developmental vulnerability behaves similarly to strain accumulation in engineering materials. Some developmental forces amplify accumulated strain, other developmental forces dissipate strain. Some trajectories become increasingly rigid, others remain adaptive and flexible. Case A resembles a system experiencing repeated loading without sufficient recovery. Case B resembles a system undergoing gradual repair and redistribution of strain. Case C resembles a system operating within a stable elastic range throughout lifetime. Although human psychology is far more complex than engineering materials, the math physics analogy provides a useful conceptual framework for understanding long-term developmental evolution. Conclusion. The purpose of this supplementary paper is not to introduce a new equation but to introduce new ways of visualizing developmental trajectories. 3 complementary graphical approaches were presented. TSI-BPD outcome trajectories, 3-dimensional developmental trajectory space, developmental spiral diagrams. Together, these figures transform developmental vulnerability from a static diagnosis into a dynamic life trajectory from a VPT perspective. The most important observation is not the numerical value of TSI-BPD itself but the shape, direction, and evolution of trajectory. Ultimately, childhood abandonment, environmental conditions, and adult relationships do not simply create isolated symptoms, they help shape the topology of an entire human life. Epilogue. Throughout my studies in mathematics, physics, engineering, psychology, and pathophysiology of medicine, I have repeatedly found that trajectories are often more informative than snapshots. A single measurement provides information about the present. A trajectory provides information about the journey. The combined figure presented in this paper attempts to visualize that journey from 3 different perspectives: outcome, mechanism, and structural evolution. Whether viewed through psychology, engineering, metabolism, neuroscience, or pathophysiology, the principle remains similar. Understanding where a person is today is important. Understanding how that person arrived there may be even more important. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to T.E. author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.